Okay, I will try to present like 40 minutes about my work, and then I can take any kind of question. Let me see. Where is Eric? Okay. There are many different types of public spaces in the New York City. Street, sidewalk, subway station, and train, bus, public park, shopping mall, etc. To each regular users, each of the public space become an important physical setting in their city life. Initially, I attempted to answer two questions about city life at the individual level. The first question was who New Yorkers are in the context of space and location. And then the second question was about what has made New York overall, from my perspective, so civic and functioning well, despite of many unfamiliar people gathering always together around each public spaces. Rather than looking for an answer for each of these two separate questions, I turn my interest in seeking something common to both questions. What these two questions are in common is that regular users of New York City public spaces hold their personalized urban style in public. That is what I call the present time urban style in public. The present time urban style in public is defined at the individual level as a confluence of the human perceptual, cognitive, emotional, and corporeal systems of knowledge and bodily practices while navigating around any public space in New York City. Otherwise, their present time urban style in public is something comparable with Pierre Bourdieu's habitus. According to Bourdieu's, habitus is defined as a system of lasting, transposable dispositions, which integrating past experiences, functioning at every moment as a matrix of perceptions, appreciations, and actions. This concept of habitus is to organizational field what the term, the present time urban style in public is to the New York City public spaces. In general, their present time urban style in public is, in Bourdieu's word, a kind of a feel for the game in the loose field of the city's public spaces. That is, their perceptual, affective, and mental dispositions and bodily practices to perform their daily routines, as well as to manage any public relations with others in the city. My point here is that for each of regular users of New York City public spaces, the present time urban style in public is why they can keep their everyday public life in the city more routinized. And this can be also one of the reasons why they can make their public relations with other urban strangers more predictable and civil. But my main argument stressed in this book is that one frightening and completely unexpected public experience also in the past can be common denominator shared among regular users of New York City public spaces, each of whom hold their own present time urban style in public. In other words, it is my view that commonly each of regular users of New York City public space has forced certain aspect of their present time urban style in public in consequence of their unusual public experience in New York City. As a matter of fact, the vividness and liveliness of one particular surprising experience in human life will never abate with the passage of time. Such an anticipated public occasion can be particularly a novel experience for young adult New Yorkers in the light of their relatively short history of public life in the city and in consideration of their relatively good capacity for recounting it. Anyone who had experienced unexpected or problematic public event in the city would find such a person experience unforgettable. And it is also very meaningful to themselves from their point of view of the actual here and now. During the real time, when we are faced with such an unexpected event or an encounter with a stranger in one New York City public space, it is not easy to figure out accurately the situational issues, settings, stranger profile, and our own situational positions, because we are usually overwhelmed emotionally with the situation encounter itself. In this respect, the more meticulous configuration of situation embodiment in such a personal experience comes naturally after its termination, because our human nature tends to identify the root cause, substance, and situational process of such an important matter in our personal life. In other words, people can easily recollect the specifics of their particular life-affecting experience, including each situational problem, those directly involved in it, their situational perceptions, emotions, cognition, even their or others' behavioral reaction at the time. Let me briefly describe one particular public experience of my own in New York City. One early evening, almost 10 years ago, I entered one public bathroom at New York City Port Authority bus terminal before taking my return bus to my New Jersey home. Inside it, I was in less than a minute to wash my hand in one of each three sinks placed in parallel. Until that time, I paid no attention to a person using another sink at my left side. At that very moment, when I turned my upper body slightly to the left to reach a paper towel dispenser attached straight above the sink to dry my wet hand, there was a man who was busy shaving his beard in front of that sink. Indeed, his conduct could be considered to be very bizarre to ordinary public bathroom users. And he appeared to be a homeless person, as I took a glimpse at a push cart containing some clothes and blanket next to him. To pick up one or two clothes from that paper towel dispenser, I stretched my left arm very close over to him, and then suddenly he wielded his straight razor with a sharp blade wildly to me. Instinctively, I quickly moved my body aside from him to avoid this offense and any further confrontation. Since termination of that public event, whenever I should have used it, I was always concerned about who else was around me in it. This event happened really a long time ago, but I keep thinking about every moment of it, including my situational perceptions, emotions, and my behavioral reactions beyond the time frame. Within this in mind, main objective of my book attempt to analyze the entity of the situated self while facing an anticipated public event or strange encounter in New York City. Phenomenologically, the situated self is my own notion that represent the things of themselves of public event from one's subjective point of view. Theoretically, phenomenology is the study of human experience from one's own point of view. That is from a first-person point of view. The state self is also a synthetic notion and application of Martin Heidegger's Dasein as I myself, being, and temporalities. Here, summary of those kind of concept can be here. Being is an issue for Dasein. Dasein understand or predict itself in its being. Being is to be conceived in terms of time. It's one's understanding of the being of entities, its meanings, and its modifications and derivatives in time. Otherwise, the state itself was a temporal structure of one's being in the real world that has the same connotation as being there for a while with one's emerging concern about something or oneself. Before analyzing this concept of the straight self and its linkage to another term, the present time urban style in public, empirically and in detail, I want to mention my research methodology and responses briefly. A diverse group of young adult Yorkers were the main target of my research respondent. As a researcher too, I used online survey platform known as Qualtrics to distribute my survey instrument that included open-ended questions like the straight self and their present time urban style in public. To do this, I distributed my online anonymous survey linked to my former student, the student of my colleagues, and some student of 2-year college and 4-year university across 3 boroughs of New York City, Manhattan, Bronx, and Brooklyn. In addition, by email, I further contact the directors, general managers, or president of some neighborhood or street block association in Manhattan's 12 community board with the aim of requesting them to share this online survey link to their members or neighbors. Vital part of a phenomenological method is a first-person report that is known as a self-description on a personal experience. In this regard, my online survey was this kind of self-reported survey. A period of data collection was starting from February 2020 through December 2020. Total of 341 responses were collected, and 331 self-reported cases were used for content analysis. Here you can see that some of kind of demographic information. So almost like 90% of my respondents was actually under the age of 35, and almost 80% of them is actually the women here. To identify key theme in each of their self-report, one of my analytics scheme was to look for what are the most important topics or the central issue or problem each respondent described in such a particular public experience in the city. Overall, 9 major themes could be identified here. These are just public harassment, racism, crime, rudeness, kindness, panhandling, exhibition, conversation, and filthiness. It's okay. Yeah, okay. Oh, yeah.
Click X.
Oh, yeah, okay.
You don't need to keep that there.
In chapter 2 of my book, going to each of these 9 major themes in detail, I described a defining issue, situational background, stranger profile, and a pattern of public relations with the strangers at the time of the public event they face. For example, public harassment can be defined as strangers' abuses, harassings, and annoyance against some unacquainted people in the same public space. Each space type can be included, such as touching, grabbing, pinching, stroking, following, and various types of street remark, critical commentary, name calling, or insult. A case in point, one of my respondents, a white woman aged 18 to 24, described her personal experience in the Lower East Side one day. A friend and I walking through the small park, looking at the murals painted on the concrete walls surrounding the park. At one point, my friend and I came to part from each other to look at different murals. And then I was passing a man who was walking alone. When I was passing by him, he slapped my butt, and then he could quickly walk away. I yelled something at him. I walked over to my friend and told her what had happened, and we left and walked back to my apartment.
Can I ask you?
Yes.
What is the prompt that people are responding to? What is the question that you asked?
I will show you this one soon. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Coming back to my core concept, the straight self, it is one's particular personal experience, that is one's existential straightness that occur as specific spot of one's cities and public spaces. It also signifies an revelations of one's being in the world, or sort of one's lived experience at a certain time and place. Moreover, the self-report of a real-world experience can be integral to the analysis of the straight self. On the whole, the straight self was the temporal and synthetic being that bring together one's certain human trait, perceptions, physiological sensations, and emotions, and cognition, and behavioral reactions while facing or observing an unanticipated public event. During the whole time of such a public event, the straight self flows naturally and temporarily from the straighted self in public 1 to the straighted self in public 2 in one's personal world. Okay, here there are those questions here. So I had like 6 open-ended questions to ask this term straighted self. Briefly state when and where this happened in the context of your destination at the time. State the details of such a personal experience, including the general situation and specific nature of that problematic, unusual, or disruptive matter, incident, or event, and something else here. And during the time of your encounter with a stranger, what specific did that stranger do to you? And during your encounter in the situation, what was the general emotional state you experienced? During that time of your encounter with a stranger, did you think of how to cope with it? During the time of your encounter with a stranger, what did you do to a stranger in terms of a bodily, expressive, or communicative, and or behavioral aspect? In this situational course, the phase of the term, my term, just the straight self in public 1 is understood as the experiential domain of the self, usually at its beginning, who activated the specific types of one's perception, physiological sensation, nation consciousness, and emotion. More specifically, an adverse encounter in the situation amount to one's initial observation to its setting, and the people directly involved in it, with or without one's functioning of the other types of perception, like auditory, olfactory, and just the tactile perceptions. At the early stage of such a public occasion, one's perception opening naturally accompanies some of one's somatosensory sensations or bodily symptoms like a fast heartbeat, nervousness, lump in the throat, or sweaty palms. At the same time, another change in one's inner world arises as well. It's one's nation's consciousness that reflect an instantaneous assessment devoid of any deliberate situation evaluation. Here, this internal state of the self at the time is to intuit oneself what's going on here, who is being involved directly or indirectly in it, and or what has already happened to oneself or another in the situation. At last, the culmination of the straight self in public 1 comes from the elicitations of one's emotion. When facing or observing such particular public event in the city, one's evocation of certain emotions was also the inner time of awakening the specifics of one's personal orientations. One last domain of which they represent the private character of the self, such as individual level well-being, choice, and liberty. The other domain of which correspond to the collective nature of the self, such as in-group membership, social rules, and social norms. Chapter 3 of my book described many self-reported cases about the nature of the straight self one, the straight self in public one. In general, the private nature of one's self in personal orientation is characteristics of most humans who care about their own or others' well-being. The very broad area of the private nature of personal orientation include the individual right and their interest in physical, material, or mental or psychological well-being in the context of one's public life in New York City. As one of these self-reported cases regarding the personal safety, for example, there was an incident described by one of my respondents, Asian woman aged 18 to 24, ahead of her strange encounter, and while writing the survey, her observation of the homeless man in his late 50s started causing her some concern. She wrote, I was afraid that homeless man was going to hurt me. And then this imminent risk of her physical safety arose abruptly in herself through her self-detection of various situational cues that result in her strong emotions. Here, like uncertainty and the fear. At last, she was trapped in his aggressive conduct of panhandling. The man eventually approached me. I looked up at him as he asked me for spare change. I kind of told him that I didn't have any cash on me. Instead of walking away, he stood in front of me for almost 5 minutes staring at me. To her, this long silent period of his unjustifiable standing with a cold expression on his face also became her inner time of arousing the feeling of fear with some physiological sensation. At this time, I felt my muscles tense up and I was scared. I didn't know what to do as I sat there frozen. In a word, the sudden awakening of her physical safety came in her with and through her situational perceptions, nation's consciousness, and the mixture of her physiological sensation and emotional arousal at the time. The collective nature of the individual self in one's personal orientation epitomizes their own subjective world on a large human society they belong to. The typical forms are societal level laws, norms, rules, and hierarchy. As an example for this, one Asian male respondent was straight to catch sight of one rider's sale of marijuana on the subway train. Yes. Prior to this unanticipated observation, his situational setting was, I was going to school on the F train around 6 p.m. on a weekend in November 2019. I was sitting down just minding my own business when the stranger got on the train. What made this situational setting turning problematic started with that stranger's public announcement. He advertised what he had for sale. However, this wasn't a regular candy sale or mixtape sale. He was actually selling marijuana. With his feeling of astonishment, he continued observing his situational conduct. He was asking all the passengers on the train if they would want to purchase any amount in a loud and alarming manner. I was sitting right next to him while this was all happening. During the whole time of that public occasion, he felt two types of emotion. During this encounter, I felt very shocked and anxious. Besides, he further described his reason for such unstable emotion at the time. People dance on the train, ask for money, sell candy, cookie, etc. But I have never in my life encountered anyone asking people to buy weed on the subway train. During the real situation, one's emotional experience itself is not only one's in a time of awakening, certain features of a personal orientations at this phase of the straightened self in public one, it also plays another important role. That is the turning point of the self who entered oneself into the straightened self in public two. The straight self in public two can be understood as the nexus of one's emotion, the reflexive consciousness, like situational monitoring and conscious deliberation, and behavioral management in the situation. In other words, one's emotion aroused in the situation become a driving force for one's cognitive appraisal or the reflective consciousness, and or for one's behavioral reaction to manage the eliciting event or to deal with someone directly involved in it on their own. Literally speaking, for one thing, one's stress and emotion affect cognitive appraisal, and for another, the inner stream of the reflective consciousness has a direct influence on deactivation or otherwise deactivation of coping behavior, like physical movement or verbal response, for the sake of the situational self-management. In the frame of the straightened self in public two, there are 5 different victims group. The first victim group was actually vigilant agents who are careful monitors, thoughtful assessors, and judicious actors in the wake of a negative emotion during the travel the public encounter. The instinctive defenders largely fell short of the functioning of the reflective consciousness, but they were impulsive actors for the situational self-management. Situational receptors were those who put a hold to both the reflective consciousness and coping behavior due to their strong negative emotion in the situation. Situational escapers were quick and impatient actors who couldn't afford to monitor and evaluate the development of the situation more carefully. Unlike instinctive defenders, their behavior patterns were usually self-protective, far from aggressive against their assailant. A fractured agent took a situational standing, very similar to that of situational receptors, especially in the aspect of the pause for any adaptive behavior. But some of them had a relatively good situational consciousness, while others activated the situational monitoring only, devoid of any situational deliberations. Chapter 4 of my book introduced specific self-reported case for each of these 5 public victim groups in one of the situational phase of the straightened self in public 2. As one victim group again, vigilant agents are at the individual level characteristics of the execution of prudent behavior under the auspices of their reflective cognition during the situation event to cope with it largely for their own personal safety. This group of actual or potential victims are actually see the provocation of their situational emotion as a direct motive to push themselves to drive situational assessment with a reflective stance and to behave in a proper ways. For example, as a case that is relevant to this victim group in the frame of the straightened self in public 2, my respondent, one Hispanic woman, aged 25 to 34, was unexpectedly encountered with unknown men who followed her from the street, even up to the inside of a subway train one evening. Her sense of imminent danger aroused her fear. To her, the intensity of this particular emotion was one thing, and her situational self-management against that male stranger was another. As the conscious person at the time, she monitored his attitude and physical movement to her very carefully with the following emotional state. He kept looking at me in an intimate way, then he tried to get close to me. In the meantime, the weights on how to deal with her awful position began being conceived in her mind. A couple of her situational plans, she finally had a thought of, or I was either going to find a police office or I was going to get close to someone on the train. In fact, she made use of a set of planned behavior to secure her safety from him. For one thing, I pretended that he was not talking to me. Second, I actually got close to the crowd that was waiting for the train. And third, I pretended that I was on the phone talking to my friend. In this same frame of the street self in public too, in my study, there are the 5 different bystander groups. Chapter 5 of my book introduced specific self-reported case for each of these 5 public bystanders. Sorry about that. At first, the situational observers were careful inspectors about each situational development, but they fell short of both their deliberate planning and the performance of any public conduct to deal with it on their own. Situational stayers were sort of a situational onlookers with their lack of both the conscious deliberation and proper behavioral response. A factor that actually distinguished situational stayers from situational observers was the relatively strong emotional intensity than situational observers felt at the time. Silent regulars kept a firm hold on reflective stance, monitoring and deliberation that led themselves the proper coping behavior. Situational avoiders were the so-called quick and defensive actors because of too great an emotional press at the time, despite the fact that they couldn't monitor the situation process relatively well. Situational participants were situational actors, whether prudent or hasty, in the middle of the public event, public encounter, or soon after its termination. Prior to their drive for any situation, action, or participation, some of them underwent either or both of cognitive monitoring and deliberation, but some didn't. As the first bystander group, typically situational observers were good monitors about the situational development they had observed. Nonetheless, they were far from situational actors. One example for this was a public experience from my respondent who was unidentified in racial category, age just 18 to 24. That problematic event she had observed while riding a subway train was out of nowhere, a young woman fell to the ground by the train door. The friend she was with started panicking and tried to get her up. A few passengers on the train jumped in to help and check her pulse. In the following way, she described her affective state at the very moment when that passenger had suddenly fallen down to the floor. At that time, I was in shock because I was standing just a few feet away from her. When she fell to the floor, I was frightened and unsure of what to do. On the top of the feeling of such intense emotion, her visual perception and mind were fixed on its situational process. Another woman opened a water bottle from her bag to put on her face. When she finally woke up, she started crying. Moreover, there was an indication that this respondent thought of a behavioral plan seriously for the passenger facing the crisis in health. The first thing I thought of was pressing the emergency button, and then the train has already been stopped due to the delay. So I didn't think that some other people would like step in to help her right away. However, this respondent didn't perform this specific mode of situational conduct until the female rider regained her consciousness. I stood there very frightened, honestly. Overall, this situated self is the whole entity of the temporal and subjective world that characterize a particular public experience of one's own in the city. As I mentioned earlier, I also tried to delve into the ramification of the situated self in one's urban public self of today. One's urban public self of today appropriate something of one's urban public self of yesterday, as far as it lies with one's personal interest, concerns of a future. Indeed, one's urban public self of today has a natural propensity to embrace that particular personal experience in whole or in part. Otherwise, the situated self becomes one of the vital parts of one's urban public self of today, which is what I call the present time urban style in public. In chapter 6 of my book, according to each of the 9 major public themes, I try to demonstrate that their own experience of this situated self has already become an important kind of a self-reference to their present time urban style in public. Broadly, their present time urban style in public comprise what's current urban public outlook. For example, vigilance, indifference, openness, and one's urban public behavior, such as physical or social distance, self-engagement, certain facial gestures, or bodily postures, or bodily movement. There was one open-ended question for the present time urban style in public. After your experience of such a memorable occasion or event, did it cause you to alter your perception about others in public, to change your daily routines, or to self-monitor your surroundings in the New York City? As one example of one's current urban public outlooks, the mindset of vigilance with a mental state of coolness in the domain of urban public outlooks has become the important element of their present time urban style in public for one female respondent. She experienced a racist comment amid her benevolent help for white lady who had severely fallen onto the entrance of the bus with all of her items spilled over to the ground. The boy, the Caucasian, picked up her wallet and some other small item. I pick up her phone and helped to pick up along with the other girl. The girl and I were both clearly black. The lady quickly got up almost as if she didn't want me and the other girl to help her up, snatching her phone out of my hand and putting them in her purse while mumbling, "You might rob me." She turned to the young man holding her wallet and said, "Thank you, young man. May God bless you." From that day forward, I'm struggling with how white people would think of or interact with me. So I kind of just wait it out first and let them set the tone. Another short example, associating some public outlook with your set of urban public behaviors, specific kinds of facial and bodily expression, was described by one female and Asian respondent. On the survey, she faced offensive racist gesture from 3 white teenagers during the early 2020 crisis of coronavirus pandemic in New York City. A youth forum in her current personalized urban style in public emerged from that particular experience. I did alter my perception of others, such as I no longer see everyone as a positive human being. Since then, I tend to look away from others, put my hat and sunglasses on. In conclusion, I approached the majority of regular users of New York City public spaces had experienced at least one surprising public event or strange encounter. In my work, basically, I attempt to figure out the essence or the entity of such a personal experience, phenomenologically under the introduction of some new concept, including de-situated self. What's more, such a public experience can be common denominator to shape the present time urban personal style in public that can also keep the city life with the other urban strangers more routinized, predictable, tolerant, and even civic. When such a personal experience was, whether such a personal experience was negative or positive, I can say that most New Yorkers had such a personal experience during their public life in New York City.
Hey, thank you. So we'll open up the questions. If anybody in the room has questions, and then we'll keep an eye out for folks on
Yes.
Zoom. Yeah.
I'm just impressed that you took Heidegger as you employed a testable hypothesis essentially for some of these concepts. Well, one thing I thought of quickly, sort of, especially at the end here, is the idea is the blase self.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Because I'm not sure if you mentioned that or not, but
Yeah.
where would that fit into the typology, right?
Yeah.
Well,
So, exactly.
this is how we are in the city, you know, just kind of like.
Yeah. Yeah. This is the blase.
attitude.
Yeah. Exactly.
That-
Rising part of
Blase
yeah. Urban public behavior section. Yeah. Exactly. Even this is perception when we appear into any kind of public spaces. Always we have to show indifference to other people, especially other strangers. Yeah, yeah.
Thank you so much. This is great. I appreciate the invitation. So I was wondering, and this is based on what you've already shared. So what do you think is the effect or the role, how's that, of race and ethnicity and gender?
Yeah, yeah.
Both of the respondents and their encounters
Yeah.
in the public space.
Yeah, actually, I have one category for public racism section. But actually my methodology is really different from existing kind of approach. Personally, I really want to neutralize any kind of preconception before I conduct research. So I collect only basic information. I have no idea who my respondents are, only their basic profiles. Based upon that information, some people talk about kind of the experience of racism on the subway train or even the street. It happened. It's not easy to analyze kind of deep causes of their expression about this experience of racism from certain people. Some people who belong to actually, for example, non-Hispanic white. But I cannot judge anything more beyond the kind of the description here.
But I think it'd still be a value.
Yeah. You are right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I wanted to ask something similar, actually, but first of all, I'm sorry I came in late and I missed the beginning, but did you just say that these things all came up on Facebook?
No, survey.
Yeah, this is an online survey. Online survey. Yeah. This is
So you put survey online and everything.
Yeah, and then this is snowball sampling. So this is like I here call it the snowball sampling. I contact you, and then you introduce this online survey, and then they respond. Actually, yeah, survey questions are not easy. Many of them are open-ended questions, so it's not comfortable to finish like next 20 minutes. Sometimes it takes like more than hours. But I'm very happy to contact my former student who was so nice, and then they responded to many questions. Yeah.
Anyway, my question is different, but it's related to the last question. You are reporting on and analyzing the experience of the person who I don't know how do you, what terminology you use for the reporter and the encounter, which may or may not be threatening or unexpected or something, the other in any case.
Yeah.
And especially at the beginning, I'm thinking about exactly what you are, which is how does the various characteristics of the other person influence the response? I mean, in the beginning, the first few cases mentioned the homeless person.
Yes.
Now, when we see somebody on the street, we don't know that that person is homeless. We may assume it, but we don't know it. And there are things that may be carrying a lot of, various indications. But it nevertheless is a way of typifying the response. And of course, the nature of the case you're talking about, people are going to give you reports about people of whom they are cautious, suspicious, concerned. Although one of your questions was, I forget what it was, a happy encounter or something like that. And I don't think you reported any of those. But even in the case of the woman who was being helped after she fell into subway, she thought they were stealing her phone. All of this relates to me because I have mobility problems and I've had a number of experiences in the past several weeks. I've fallen, and I guess I look safe. I'm an old man, I'm white, I look more or less respectable, people of all races have come and when I've fallen and picked me up, have been concerned. And that's not what you asked for, so that's not what you got. But I'm still thinking that the characteristic of the other person makes a big difference to what happens.
You're right. That's absolutely right. So I need more kind of in-depth kind of interview, and then even I ask about this kind of online question, and then I need both of them. But I want to see kind of a diverse scope of what kind of experience they had. This is what I want. That's why I collected many kind of cases, and then classify what can be main issue. And then I found out that it's very interesting. Some of them really overlapping each other, so really overlapping each other. But I found that this is also my judgment. I put that. I think this is more about the racism over harassment, and then I make this again. Many kind of the stories can be kind of overlapping, and it's kind of logical. Just they have to distinguish each other. And then
very interesting topic. It's a very I see that every day in New York City. My question is, do you have any recommendation of this social problem that exists? And to explain to others who are not New Yorkers how New York has a lot to offer. And despite this, this issues of culture or social problem that we have, or maybe some people that judge us.
I mean, so my assumption is that I think this is a good point. My assumption is that actually I'm showing more positive side about our life in the New York City, where we have so many people and very dense together. But it's very, I mean, even after the pandemic, we got some kind of rising crime rate, but those numbers are not actually serious compared to the early 1990s, even before actually the 1990s. So we have more people now. We have almost 9 million people living together, even many people coming from other locations. So we meet each other every moment. But strangely, we are very civil each other. So I think this is my starting point. What happened? Even I had some kind of unusual experience, but that was a very some kind of cases. But as overall, I'm very fine with standing together with any strangers close to me. But this is kind of a sense of indifference. Even self-engagement can be a good strategy to participate in this kind of public spaces. Yes, Tom,
I see that point. And I appreciate the question, but I also see the point in your answer. This is not what I was going to ask, but just to say that, in my, now going on 15 years living in New York, these are experiences that I've had periodically, but not by far the norm. The millions of people I've come across. So it's interesting how they end up capturing attention and how people from outside the city can fear New York. And I've had conversations with people who live in New Jersey who are afraid of New York. Ridiculous from my perspective. But anyway, what I wanted to ask is about the role of technology in all of this. getting back to your, your theoretical framing with Heidegger, but also Schutz, which I appreciate. I don't know if people talk about Alfred Schutz's work. The sort of being in the here and now, the temporal character of one's location, both in terms of how, telephones, the ubiquity of phone technology, sort of refocuses individuals out of the here and now, or it changes the character of the here and now. But then also how they become a part of the bystander experience, the observer experience, the recording capacity of the phones. The technology being the object of theft. It seems to come in on like a dozen different levels, and I was wondering if you thought about that.
I mean, this is a fascinating question. I didn't think about this very seriously, but you're right. But sometimes technology is really a good way to avoid many kind of unexpected encounter. On the other hand, sometimes because our kind of personal habit to use every time this phone, maybe we have some kind of unexpected collision or problem with other people because we originally know on the kind of phone. So I think both sides can be very important kind of topic. Actually, I have to study more, but here I didn't put the impact of technology. It's strangely, actually, no one talk about this impact of technology and this kind of association with their own personal experiences. I collected actually almost like 400 cases now, but still no one. I mean, that's interesting.
I think that there are other even other more implicit, not manifest but latent dimensions. The impact on technology and how infrequently people carry cash. For example.
Exactly.
People ask for cash. Sorry, I don't got it wrong. There's all kinds of ways that it comes into play.
That's an excellent point. This is a really good point. But the beyond this one, just analyze only one case is to accept. I just overjudge actually this impact on current kind of our present time urban study in public. But it's very hard to ask multiple questions, multiple unexpected experience, and then so here we have a memory issue, and there's some memories. Another one, even just actually I'm attacking the existing work of embodiment work. Embodiment work is not working actually. So after situation happened, and then maybe we recollect what exactly happened. When we are simultaneously facing this kind of this encounter with a stranger, maybe we are just overwhelmed with this environment and encounter. So we have no idea what happened to my kind of sense and the perception, even cognition. So later we can actually figure it out. Actually, that is actually my feeling, and this is my cognition to deal with the situation. So that is actually a big problem from my project.
Thank you. So I got kind of like two questions. One is just in terms of your methodology. You said you collected this between February of 2020 and December of 2020, which obviously by March 2020 we were in the pandemic, and obviously it seems like a lot of what you were talking about happened on the subway. I'm wondering, did you see increase or decrease in respondents during those months because of the pandemic? So that's kind of the first question. And the second question is, it's all really interesting, but it is something about like being in New York or being in a big city where the surprising is the mundane. You know what I'm saying? Like to see shocking things, to see all of those things listed. If I didn't see that on my daily commute, I'd be almost surprised, right? I'm not actually surprised when I see it. So, and there's also this kind of interesting within the idea of public space, how place plays an important role. So for instance, I'll give an example of this morning at 6 a.m. when I was riding the L train to the gym, a fight almost broke out. Right? Two guys got into it. And observably, people just moved out of the way. It wasn't like, oh my God, what's going on? But it was like, in this place, on this train, at these particular stops, this could be expected. Versus it being, say, at the train station at maybe Times Square or within the M&M's, building, right? So place plays a real, I think, factor in how our public perception of what we are perceiving means something. Did you wrestle with it?
I mean, the second, your second question is a very interesting one. Again, accuracy of the emotion can be not actual situational emotion. It could happen. For example, when actually maybe we forgot about actually this kind of a short moment of our emotional kind of arousal. What can be that kind of aspect? And then later I said that I'm very happy because I'm very lucky not to be that kind of situation, and then so we can feel some kind of release. Well, this kind of emotion is, and then maybe based on that kind of the emotional current emotional state, and then they try to recollect this kind of question, and then maybe so the representation of all kinds of this kind of phase of situation encounter might be not quite correct. But however, even though we have that kind of problem, I think that this is a little bit better than kind of current study with embodiment, because embodiment still say that even actually this is based upon, depends upon, rely upon the memory still. But yeah, again, methodology is still not quite good, but I'm trying to really kind of develop this one. And the first question is about, this is one of the memorable and unexpected or probably events they face. Many students actually many of my students responded. They experienced in the like a junior high school or just the childhood even. They even just revitalized, revived actually those kind of serious experience when they actually came into first time in the New York, for example, Port Authority, for example, the Grand Central, and then something happened to him or her, and then so I think time is not much kind of issue before or even after the pandemic. Yeah.
Another question.
Yeah.
It's not a fantasy. As a civilized world, as civilized nations, I always have this, like, I'm thinking about when a situation occurs, the first thing to solve the situation, we think about calling the police. And I'm worried about is the police have the skill and the training necessary to understand the emotion and all these sociological issues or psychological issues of the people, who are just gonna come with their gun to treat it as that. And I see most of the some situations when the police arrive, there are chances that the situation can turn to a murder. You know, we don't know how to deal with it.
Yeah.
In the same token, I have another fantasy of seeing like in the place. I'm from Morocco originally, and we have some bathrooms. We don't have the tools here. In Morocco, they have like bathrooms in airports and bus stations designed for travelers. Who want to change or when they back take a shower. So that can diminish or can separate or can have an out there as a solution. Maybe this is my thought. And also another thing, maybe a police that can be equipped without any guns, just equipped with the understanding in sociological issues and problems that can be coming just that person can put all those emotional situations.
Yeah, the excellent point. I mean, in the case of South Korea, every location, any police spaces, even kind of very local places, they install surveillance camera, CCTV, and then it's amazing whenever something happens, just robbery happen in some community and also burglary happen. It's very easy to actually find out those, for example, perpetrator or just kind of invaders, for example. But I think that this is a kind of issue about the violation of a human right. I mean, in the case of the United States, I think we need more those kind of technology to tackle such kind of a social problem, because it happens. Usually some people actually, those travelers actually took a bus and then they ran away. Before this happened, maybe we can try to find out who they are, because these people, some kind of crime happening. For example, some community show high rate of crime rate, but the offenders actually did not come from that community. They are coming from other location, and then they commit crime, and then they ran away. It could happen. So that's why we need those kind of technological mechanism to handle this crime issue.
I just want to address this question of the police, because I think that this is very relevant to your broader question. It wasn't a part of your survey, but your broader question. And one thing we've got to realize about the police in New York is how dysfunctional the system is.
Yeah.
I mean, yes, they respond and they do violent things and it's motivated by racism.
Yeah.
But there's also this element of they can't effectively really do much.
Yeah.
And so recently we've seen these announcements on the subways, and police are on the subway platform. And
Yeah.
I think they're there to sort of make presence known, and keep, you know, intimidation from happening on the subway. But you look at these cops, they're like standing against the wall, like boredom. And you know that if something happens, you're like, officer, come quick. They're gonna like stroll over really slowly to thing. They don't really have like you know, a positive sort of character to them. And I'm not trying to deliberately be anti-authoritarian or anti-police. I'm saying this is my experience in New York of like interacting with the police and having it be this like doldrum of a response. It's like I don't really give a shit. It comes from the sort of attitude when things happen. And so I think that in and of itself becomes ingrained into the habitus of New Yorkers.
Exactly.
When New Yorkers experience these situations, interpersonal dynamics, there might be an overwhelming sort of, even if it's implicit knowledge that like we have to deal with this in the here and now, or I need the help of my neighbor, my compatriots on the train, or I need to, you know, do something else. You know, in addition to the point about the violence that is always a problem, and always a potential. I think there's just also this. They just simply, in my experience, don't do their jobs.
I mean, this is a really good point. That again, coming back to the case of South Korea, for example, when this kind of police office are doing some kind of not doing their kind of role, I mean the task, and then many people have to take a picture and just send this image to the police department, and then he's doing nothing, and then because this is a kind of some kind of threat about their kind of position, and then. I think I saw that many actually Korean police officers working very hard. I mean, I'm not sure this pretending to work hard, but in terms of their kind of action and the posture, looks like working very hard. But here, what you said is really, so we need more kind of a report. Maybe it's not bad idea even take a picture and then send this one to NYPD, maybe some kind of even pressing, or I'm not sure, but some way we need a kind of a personal surveillance to our office.
Just as an example, I got hit by some dude who took off after he hit my car. And I got a picture of his license plate. Right there. Cops didn't want to see a picture.
Oh my!
What are you talking about? You know, so you know, it's like sort of, I'm not being motivated by that experience. I'm just saying that I think that something about the habitus of being in New York is motivated by this sort of like necessity, and perhaps the kindness comes from this too. This necessity of solving problems, this necessity of being there in the here and now when necessary.
That's
I'm not thinking.
I mean, this is a really good point. I think the Ben has some question, right? Let me see what is here. I don't know where it's here.
Just Ben just have to unmute himself.
Okay. Go ahead, Ben.
Oh, hey, Professor. Thank you so much for giving this talk. It was great. It's so cool to see this research that I know you've been doing over the last few years come to fruition. And I was just thinking about, you know, all of the sort of experiences that I'm sure you've gathered, and sort of also weighing in a little bit on like what Calvin was saying, you know, about sort of the norm of all of these crazy things that go on the subways. But I think also like now, pandemic, post-pandemic, whatever you want to call it, my experience on the subway, at least for part of it, there was even more happening than I had ever experienced before. So it seems like there almost is even more post follow-up research for you to do potentially. The sort of New York pandemic experience of what people are going through, because I think it really shows a lot of the sort of social, you know, I don't know if deterioration is the right word, but there is absolutely some of that happening socially within the city. You know, within just the level of homelessness that was going on, and, you know, the lack of support that a lot of these people have that, you know, was leading to a lot more of these issues. So yeah, it just got me thinking just about how many more experiences I have had personally over the last, you know, year or so. And yeah, I think it's ripe for social study and understanding. But again, yeah, I really am looking forward to hearing more about what you did and seeing your book and reading it and whatnot. I think that there's it's your whole framework and the theoretical frameworks that you use are really interesting in explaining your ideas. So I thank you so much for inviting me.
Well, thank you so much. I mean, this is a really great one. So maybe I can take a look at this kind of topic in the before pandemic and after pandemic. Even after pandemic now. So maybe three different stages to take a look at some kind of common point and the different point about this kind of experiences. Even in terms of a different kind of a public kind of theme, like maybe I think that's an excellent idea. Thank you, Ben. This is good.
Yeah, and also just to add, like what Tom was talking about, about the police presence on the subway and the way that these things have kind of shifted, and everybody is having different experiences, but how has this actually changed anything? And just the levels of security, surveillance, what have you, whether it's actually having an impact or whether it's making things worse, and the question is of who it's making things worse for. Is it actually helping the people on the train, or is it affecting the people who are struggling with security issues, with having a home or food or drug issues or whatnot? So there's a lot there.
I mean, this is an excellent point as well, but I didn't put this in one chapter whether this kind of target or bystander they have any kind of companionship or the presence or absence of police. So I actually just delete that item. This was really complicated to be included in the one of my chapter, but I concede actually those kind of group.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
Yes, thank you.
Jack raised the question of the positive. I think that's an interesting point that you brought up too.
Yeah.
Like, I think we've all had these experiences too, with people just helping us out.
Yeah.
Or we help other people.
Yeah.
Did you get interesting stories?
I mean, I actually had my chapter 2. I put the kind of public kindness. There are a lot actually happen. I mean, beyond the kind of the tolerance, some people actually, it's very kind of very rush hour time, very busy time, and there's one blind person just fell down, and I think my student, I don't know, and then really help, and they help even try to call to police, and then even to find out the location of this blind man's kind of home, and then he spent the entire day to help that person. I mean, this is one of the kind of memory I got from my soul sample. But I had, you can see almost like 100 cases out of like over 331. That's amazing. Many people have they have a more positive kind of experience. Not only this one experience, they have still see other people more, not much negative way. I mean, it depends upon the cases, but because my question is more kind of negative one, but still some people actually provide more positive responses. That's unexpected actually.
Yeah, that's very interesting.
Yeah, and I think just to piggyback over what you just said, when it comes to like public filthiness, you can't walk around New York City without seeing film, but it's like that didn't register for folks because I think it is so like, walking past a rat, I'm not like, oh my God, I'm just like, oh, this is their home too. You know what I mean?
Only I put the 10 cases that there are many of these cases, especially homeless people, like just sleeping on the subway train with a kind of huge kind of smell over there.
Right. Also highlights the tension between the habitus of the non-New York City resident, because the non-New York City resident on vacation will notice the rat.
Well, they don't notice this, it just doesn't register when he asks the question.
Something, most people actually, again, I think from New York City. So I actually, my question is, what is your current residency? And then they responded. So especially based on your New York City current life here, but you can some cases that responded, but they had very long life and the home. It's a kind of actually hometown was actually here, one of the New York City community, and then responded. So yeah, I think you are right. So the community can be different feeling. Even the location, like me, kind of I'm just in the more middle town. But people have a different kind of just spatial exposition about this kind of public encounter. So I think location can be very, very important. Even time in the morning, even daytime, the evening, maybe we have a different group of strangers on the kind of public spaces. That can be another one.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
The last one and then
Oh
we'll
yeah.
wrap it up.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Ishira, go ahead, please. This is working.
Yes, hello, Professor O. Congratulations on all this research. We are so proud of you over here on Zoom. I actually just wanted to piggyback off of Ben's answer because I will always ask about the freaking police. And so I was really curious, like Ben got me thinking about like the relationship the police have with these public disturbances and whether you've considered maybe exploring the avenue of policing and its effect on like perhaps cleanliness, perhaps like all these like factors you'd named. And I don't know, yeah, I was just curious if you'd considered it and if you have what you think.
You know, I have actually, this is an extremely micro level approach, but my primary interest is a more macro level interest. I'm really, policing is one of my kind of important topic to understand, especially, you know, just I am very concerned with about the trend of crime during the last 5 decades. And I realized that something going on here. So why we are much better, I mean, not better, much civic, in terms of kind of some level of social collision and problem with each other. So I just try to do some kind of policing stuff for my project, and also I talk about the kind of growing number of small businesses across any location in New York City. That's another one, and then also gentrification can be another unexpected positive impact to reduce some kind of crime problem in New York City, around New York City. So I had that kind of idea quite a long time, but I couldn't do that because of so many problems to collect the data. But this one, and then I did really reverse way to start with a more micro level, and then I maybe if I have more time, so I can touch about beyond the individual experiences, what can be collective or aggregate property affecting New York City, much civic and tolerant to each other. Maybe it can be my kind of future project. Thank you.
All right, well, thank you.
Thank you.